Control of the U.S. House leans Republican, but it's much closer than predicted.
The fact that we're on the radar means a lot.
Let's let them count the rest of the ballots, and I hope they're sending me to the Capitol.
House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy has already officially launched his bid for Speaker.
We are going to take the House back.
I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues.
The media is not my friend. The media is going to put my record out there, but yet I've been transparent with everything I've ever done.
So I'm going to need you to stick with me for 4 more weeks. Can we do that?
A midterm election with a muddled mandate and still some mystery. Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett, coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. We thank you for joining us. Of course, as you know, we are still waiting the results of several key races, House and Senate, and those will dictate the balance of power right here in our nation's capital. Now, there are a number of uncalled House races out west that in particular will determine which party controls that body. And for more on that, CBS News Elections and Surveys Director, my good friend, Anthony Salvanto joins us. Anthony, catch our audience up on a new CBS News House estimate. What is it?
How you doing, buddy? All right, here we've got the latest. It's 213 Republican to 206 Democrats. Now, as you know, we've been tracking this since polls closed on election night. This estimate takes into account all that we know about the trend lines, including in some races that haven't been projected in and of themselves yet. But it does give you a sense of A, just how close this is, and B, why the Republicans are a little closer to that 218 magic number of House control. So this takes it all into account. There are more undecided races than this formally, but that's where we stand right now. Minimum 213 for the reps and 206 for the Ds, Major.
So, Anthony, just to underscore what you just said, because I think it's really important for people to understand that these are our estimates of at least the sort of, if you think of it in construction terms, the floor for both parties, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, we try to give you a sense of all that we know, including a lot of these races that haven't been projected yet, but we see where the trend lines are going in them. So this is our best estimate right now, obviously with some uncertainty there. That's represented by that white space, the all-important white space in between the red and the blue there, of where this will ultimately end up. But that's our best estimate right now.
That would be a gap tooth and an upside-down smile, the way I look at that, Anthony. So as you well know, and our audience has probably come to appreciate, there are a number of uncalled House races in my native state of California. Take us through the numbers.
Yeah, indeed. I'm going to punch this up over here. We'll look at the House races. Let's go out west and zoom in. All right. Any place you see in yellow is still, at this moment, a complete toss-up. So I'm going to zoom in. As you and I both know very well, Southern California. I'm going to try to get this to behave for a second here, Major. All right. You know, with mixed results. It usually does.
Yes, exactly.
You and I have become all too familiar with this. Okay, so let me start right here. California 47. This one is really tight. Katie Porter just ahead of Scott Baugh at this moment. You know, one of the things we have to emphasize about California, everybody should understand, and you can speak to this, is that it is typical for California to count slowly. They do not count all their ballots on election night, right? So here we, and folks will remember from 2018 when it took weeks for us to settle out how things were going to be, right? Anyway, so that's CD 47, CD 49, right, is Mike Levin at 51-48 right now. But here again, and this is another one we're watching, let me show you up here, 58% in, right? So it's just over half of the vote that's in. So that's one of the other ones that we'll be tracking as well, Major.
Any place outside of the great state of California that you're keeping an eye on in terms of House races yet to be decided?
Well, I think a lot of folks are looking at this yellow space right here in Colorado. This is a bit of a surprise, but this is Lauren Boebert's district against Adam Frisch here. And this one, 96% in. It's really, really close, right? 159 to 158. This one remains a toss-up and hasn't been projected yet. That is a lead of, at this moment, 794 votes for her. So we'll be keeping an eye on this one. Obviously, she's been in so many headlines among the Republicans right now. So that's clearly one that's captured the national interest, Major.
Anthony Salvanto, we thank you for that. Colorado's 3rd congressional district, a +7 Republican district. That's why it is more than mildly surprising Lauren Boebert in a tight battle for re-election. Anthony, again, thank you so very much. Both Republicans and Democrats are reacting to midterm elections, and with that reaction always comes a few recriminations. They're also looking at possible leadership changes within their conference or caucus. For more on this, I am joined by 2 of my CBS News colleagues. Capitol Hill producer Rebecca Kaplan, I'm happy to say, joins me here at the desk. And congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane is also here in our Washington, D.C. bureau. So, Rebecca, let me start with you. What are the early machinations on the Republican side as the results of the midterm election still come in?
Well, Kevin McCarthy, the presumptive speaker on the Republican side, who's been angling for this job for years now, wasted no time. He came out 2 a.m. on election night saying, when you wake up, we're going to have the majority. That didn't quite come true, but didn't slow him down later that day.
Maybe he went waking up on Saturday or Sunday or Monday or Tuesday of next week. We'll see. Wake up could be an elastic concept.
Exactly. Tomorrow morning. Different meeting.
Whenever tomorrow morning is.
Exactly. But he didn't waste any time after that either. Wednesday, by midday, he was out of the gate with this letter declaring to his colleagues, I am running for House Speaker. I need your support, promising to be more of a listener than a speaker, which really actually tells you a lot about how Kevin McCarthy came to be in his current position. He has done an excellent job over the past few years of co-opting the people who used to be his critics. We're looking at former House Freedom Caucus Chairman Jim Jordan, definitely a prominent member on the hard right, caused a lot of headaches for former Speakers Boehner and Ryan. Now, a key part of McCarthy's team. He's going to probably be running, if Republicans take the majority, the House Judiciary Committee. That's going to give him a big pathway to do a lot of investigations into the Biden administration. And getting those allies into his camp is how McCarthy is making this play to lead the Republican Party.
Scott MacFarlane, I'll ask you for your thoughts on these Republican maneuvers, but also on the Democratic side. Democrats feel they still may lose the House majority, but they don't feel they've taken all of the losses or absorbed nearly the beating that they thought they would. How is that being interpreted within questions about future leadership?
Well, one incoming House Democrat, Major, characterized the leadership calls that are going out as, quote, suffocating. So there's mobilizing on both sides ahead of whatever leadership elections are expected to take place. It's kind of the irony of congressional elections. When the voting stops, when the ballots are counted, new votes are being sought from the members just elected for these leadership elections. It's obvious to everyone that Nancy Pelosi's future is uncertain. She has been cryptic about it. She hasn't announced a firm plan to run to be leader again or not. Along with her come a number of dominoes that can fall. Steny Hoyer has been the Democratic leader, the number 2 in Democratic leadership for quite some time, measured by decades, not by years. Jim Clyburn has been 3rd in the hierarchy for years. There has long been this young group of Democrats trying to displace or at least succeed those 3. So the calls are going out there, and at every level of leadership, there are different positions that go all the way down the totem pole, and the calls are active, they are frenetic, and they're happening already.
And Scott, it seems to me that Democrats, had they taken the beating that Republicans were promising but that did not manifest, these questions about Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn might have already been answered. But because the Democrats at 206 or 207 or whatever the final number is did better, they might be able to have another 2 years maybe.
I think that's certainly right, but I can't get 2010 out of my mind, when Democrats experienced what then President Obama characterized as a shellacking, and there was no reasonable alternative who stood up as an alternative candidate to Nancy Pelosi, to Steny Hoyer, which is why they kept those leadership positions, which 8 years later would sweep the party back into power, and where they remain to this day. That's the question over the next 96 hours. If there is to be an alternative, who is the alternative? Who's the person that stands up and says, it's me now? In the absence of that, in that vacuum, Nancy Pelosi maintains that political epicenter of strength, and time is running short for an alternative to stand up as we wait for Ms. Pelosi's announcement whether she's going to try to continue.
So, Rebecca, you know this Republican conference well. They were expecting a larger majority. A smaller majority, if achieved, complicates life for the incoming Speaker, presumptive Kevin McCarthy. Explain to the audience how.
Well, a narrow majority means that there's less room for people on the far right of the party who want to go in their own direction, maybe break away on certain votes, to do that. The smaller your majority, the more you have to hold your conference in line. And just look at the struggles that Speaker Pelosi has had over the last 2 years, navigating these fights between progressives and moderates on the infrastructure bill, on big Democratic priorities. She's had to hold them together. But one of her strengths is as a legislator and knowing exactly where those pressure points in her conference are. And she's known for not taking a vote to the floor if she's not going to win it. Now, McCarthy is untested to some degree in this field. And so I think one thing that's going to be very challenging is to see whether he can navigate a small majority, whether he can keep those ends in line, because I think they've gotten very used to, in his quest for leadership over the past couple of years, getting a yes from McCarthy on what they want. You know, he's going to put Marjorie Taylor Greene back on her committees, and he stuck her behind him at the big GOP policy rollout earlier this fall. Does that mean that she's willing to go along with whatever he wants to do? Or is she going to say, hey, I still, no matter how much you've given me, I want my independent voice and I'm going to use it how I see fit?
Scott McFarland, you know this, Rebecca knows it, I know it, but our audience might not. The House is a majoritarian position. That is to say, the majority party runs things, provided it can use its majority power to enforce its will. This is on procedural votes and basic day-to-day functioning. And sometimes the most dramatic moments coming from the House is when a procedural vote sometimes fails. These procedural votes for Kevin McCarthy, if he becomes the Speaker with this very small House Republican majority, if it is to be achieved, will be dramatic almost day in and day out, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I would add to what Rebecca just said. Nancy Pelosi doesn't bring a losing vote to the floor. You know who did bring losing votes to the floor? Kevin McCarthy's two predecessors. Paul Ryan, famously in 2017, when the bill to repeal Obamacare didn't pass. How about 2008, when the TARP vote came up? Of course, that was a different leadership in the House at the time, but the Republicans couldn't mobilize the votes to get TARP passed the first time. So this is a real problem, even with a margin larger than 4 or 5, because the Freedom Caucus is known for being a fly in the ointment. You have such a diversity, too, in the incoming Republican conference. Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be there, and newly elected Republicans from the suburbs of New York City are going to be there. That's quite a spectrum from one side to the other.
As a famous salsa commercial once said, New York City, Rebecca Kaplan and Scott McFarland. We thank you.
Nice.
As you well know, control of the Senate could take up to a month to determine because Georgia voters, they're preparing for a December 6th runoff. I will talk to the chair of the Senate Democrats' campaign arm about that race and much, much more coming up. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future.
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. When weather turns extreme,
massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane,
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS Mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it!
Let's go!
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I am Major Garrett. As you know, control of the Senate is coming down to 3 races. You've probably already circled them on your map at home because you're watching this program, right? The closely watched contest in Georgia, as we all know, heading to a runoff. CBS News has not made projections in the Senate races in Arizona or Nevada. For more on all of this, Democratic Michigan Senator Gary Peters joins us now. Senator Peters, also the chair of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Senator, always great to see you. So as I understand it, there's a press release I've got in front of me, the DSCC, that's your committee, announcing at least a $7 million field organizing investment in the Georgia runoff. How does that race look to you today?
Well, I'm very confident we're going to win the race. I think it's very clear from the general election that Herschel Walker simply didn't have a coalition as other Republicans on the ballot had. In fact, he trailed every statewide Republican that was on the ballot. Raphael Warnock clearly is the superior candidate. And you know, this always comes down, particularly in these battleground states, to candidate quality. And it's very clear the difference between these two individuals. And so as we go into this runoff, we are going to continue to do what we did in the run-up to the general election, and that's have a very robust ground campaign to make sure voters are getting out and voting and making sure that their voice is heard. And at the DSCC, that's been our main focus in all of these battleground states. We've made major investments on the ground. In fact, for the first time in our history, we've spent more in our ground campaign and talking directly to voters than we did on what are called independent expenditures, you know, TV, other kinds of media, because we felt it was important to talk directly to folks, get them to the polls. And ultimately, that's always been my experience, being in tough races myself, that when you're in a close race, a good field operation will make the difference between winning and losing. And given the contrast we have between these two candidates and Raphael Warnock's strength that he certainly demonstrated very clearly in the general election, we're confident we're going to be able to win the runoff as well.
Senator Peters, what difference would it make if this runoff is not determinative of Senate control? Would that have a negative effect either on fundraising or ground mobilization?
No, I think it's going to be a major race regardless of what happens. This is about who the folks in Georgia are going to send to represent them in the United States Senate. To me, it's about qualifications. It's about a person's character, which is so critical for folks to have representation in Washington that reflects the people in that state. So I know the folks in Georgia are concerned about who represents them in Washington and who fights for them. Raphael Warnock has an amazing record doing that in the time that he has been there, fighting for military bases in Georgia, for port facilities, for everyday folks, including reducing the cost of things like prescription drugs, making sure that seniors have a cap on their insulin payments, for example. So Raphael Warnock has delivered for the people of Georgia. He will continue to do that when reelected. And that's going to be important to every Georgian. They care about how this impacts their family in a meaningful way. And they want someone who's going to be on their side and someone who shares their values and is a man of character. And I think on all of those points, it's very clear that Raphael Warnock meets that. That's why he beat Herschel Walker in the general election, came a little less than the 50%. But that will change in the certainly in the runoff, particularly as we work to mobilize those voters who supported Senator Warnock in the first place. They will be back to support him again December 6th, regardless of whatever outside forces are out there. This is about the people of Georgia.
Senator, your committee is interested in the fate of all Democrats, but first and foremost on the fate of incumbents. Incumbents exist for Democrats in Arizona and Nevada. You have teams there watching the counting in both states. What is your sense, first of Nevada and second Arizona?
We do. We care. That's my number one goal as the chair of the DSCC, is to make sure that our incumbents come back. And right now I'm feeling very optimistic about what we're seeing both in Arizona and Nevada. Obviously, we have to let the process work itself out and have the votes counted. Every vote needs to be counted. But I'm confident when that happens, we will win both of those states. We always knew that these would be close races, and I knew that, and I think we all knew that. You could have asked me that question early last year. Are these going to be really close races? And I would have said, absolutely, they'll be close. It's going to come out to turnout, as it usually always does in a midterm, but particularly in a battleground state, which is by definition going to be a close race. But I think you see candidate quality differences that are very clear in both Arizona and in Nevada. Ultimately, that, along with a great field operation, will make the difference, and we'll be successful in both of those states.
Senator, as our viewers were looking at the numbers from Nevada, what gives you the confidence that your incumbent, Catherine Cortez Masto, will eke out a victory?
Well, we're still in the counting process, and you have to look at where those ballots are coming from. And basically, the ballots that are still yet to be counted tend to be in areas that vote more Democratic than Republican. And we know Senator Cortez Masto has considerable support in those areas. And so we're confident she's going to do very well as those ballots are counted, and we'll close that gap and eventually actually be ahead and end up winning the race.
As I understand it, your committee and the Democratic Party nationally has not only observers and field staff, but lawyers ready. Is there anything about the process in either Nevada or Arizona that in any way has given you cause for concern? And do you foresee, whatever the outcome is, litigation following decisions as to announcements of victors in either state?
Well, we're certainly monitoring it very closely. We have folks there in the field to make sure that the count is fair and free, which is what we all certainly want to see happen. Make sure that people's voices are accurately counted. So we will continue to monitor that situation. You know, we have seen, however, on the Republican side, that if they are not successful, they tend to make false claims and aggressively make those false claims. That could happen again. But we'll certainly be prepared to protect and secure the vote of people in both Nevada and Arizona.
Senator Peters, on my show, The Takeout, this afternoon, I talked to Roy Cooper, the Democratic governor of North Carolina. You may be familiar with him. I suspect you are. And I mentioned to him about the race in North Carolina for Senate. And he said, look, I understand why there was less investment there and in Ohio, because those were challengers, not incumbents. But it was his belief that had there been more investment, that race might have been closer and Sherry Beasley might have won. Your thoughts?
Well, certainly at the DSCC, we made investments in both of those states. We had two outstanding candidates, both in North Carolina and Ohio. We did make those investments. But as we mentioned at the top of this interview, my number one job is to make sure that our incumbents come back. When they do come back, we maintain the majority in the U.S. Senate with our 50 votes. But we also went on the offense. We were successful in Pennsylvania in winning that seat. But it's I don't have unlimited amount of money to spend. We have to make some tough decisions as to how we're spending money. And my focus has always been on incumbents to make sure that they come back. They were clearly the superior candidates in those races, and to invest in those races that were right on the edge to push them over the edge. Certainly, we were very successful in Pennsylvania in doing that.
Senator Gary Peters, we thank you. And just so you know, in our audience, we have asked for the chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee to join us next week. We hope that happens. When we come back, a Democrat from a purple state tells me what he thinks of a Biden 2024 presidential bid. That would be for re-election. And of course, you are streaming Red and Blue. We promise we'll be right back.
thinking about it.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
I'm thinking about it.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely.
As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
Massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane.
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women. What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done? We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I am Major Garrett. As I mentioned in the previous segment, earlier today I spoke with North Carolina Democratic Governor and Chair of the Democratic Governors Association, Roy Cooper, for tomorrow's episode of The Takeout. We talked about a ton of things, the midterms, how his party did in the governor's races across the country, and, not surprisingly, I asked him whether he thinks President Biden should run for re-election in 2024. Here's what Governor Cooper had to say.
I support him. He's been a fantastic president. I've told him that I will try to win North Carolina. And if he needs to make that decision, but if he makes the decision, yes, I'm for him 100%. I do believe that people are deeply concerned about another Trump being president or someone Trump-like. And that possibility is very, very real. We know the president has a track record being able to stop Trump in his tracks. And one thing I've known about Joe Biden for a long time, you can never, ever count him out.
You can hear my full interview with North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper on my podcast that's called The Takeout. You can stream it starting tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern on CBS News and on Paramount+. New episodes of The Takeout, well, they come out every Friday wherever you get your podcast. That does it for today. We will see you right back here on Monday at 5 p.m. for Red and Blue. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, all you have to do to see them, go to the CBS News website and go to cbsnews.com, hit Red and Blue, and you will find it, /Red and Blue, and it'll all be there. We'll see you then.
an original CBS Reports documentary.
When folks on the right talk about socialism, it's a boogeyman.
Socialists are always going to promise you free tuition, free healthcare, free everything, but they will never promise you freedom.